All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. We're talking about the Atlanta Falcons in tonight's video. Now, this is a team that has not made too many major moves in free agency, so it's pretty much why you haven't really heard too much about them. Kirk Cousins kind of really been the only headliner, and that's actually why I'm so excited about this Atlanta Falcons team, is because Michael Penix Jr. next year is going to be quarterback number one. But this was the 7th straight consecutive, I know those are two synonyms, losing season in 2024. That cannot happen. You cannot have 7 straight losing seasons. That's just the point. And I'm sick of saying this every offseason when we're talking about the damn Atlanta Falcons. Now, like I said, the glimmer of hope is Michael Penix. Now, obviously, the Falcons, it's not just Michael Penix. You got Bijan Robinson, Drake London just had a phenomenal season. You got a nice offensive line. But I know you moved off some pieces, and we'll get to that in just a second here. Offensively, Atlanta ranked 13th in scoring, putting up 23 points per game. And like I just said, they're returning pretty much all of their core players, specifically on offense. And then you have to look at the probable potential quarterback upgrade. Defense, and this has been kind of the thing with the Falcons for the last couple of seasons, the defense is a little bit different, right? Now, the Falcons last year were 23rd in points allowed, giving up about 25 points per game. Now, Grady Jarrett is now a member of the Chicago Bears, and outside of that, there's not really like major moves, but they still went out there and made moves. You got Divine Diablo, Leonard Floyd, Jordan Fuller, Morgan Cox, Mike Ford. What I like the most about the Falcons free agency thus far is that it's underwhelming. And I know it's not like, exciting a fan base. It's not exciting the masses. It's not drawing, just kind of like random NFL media attention, but that's a good thing. You don't really want to be in the NFL media world. The only team they really like is, kind of like Kansas City and, now obviously Philadelphia. But my point is, the Falcons are heading into the NFL draft, and they don't need to fill a specific hole. Obviously, there's like, the cornerback room needs some help there. Edge position, definitely need more help there. But there's not this like huge, clear, pressing need that Atlanta needs to address with the 15th overall pick. And I actually, saying that out loud, it is the 15th overall pick. I was thinking maybe it's 16. So let's start it off with Leonard Floyd before we get into the draft talk, because like I said, some of the positional need I've seen from Atlanta Falcons fans and writers, et cetera, is the edge, the cornerback, and just offensive line depth, or I should say offensive tackle depth for the foreseeable, or not foreseeable future, but for the long term, thinking in advance, right? Jake Matthews isn't getting any younger. But anyways, Leonard Floyd, now PFF isn't going to like a guy like him because he has failed to earn a PFF grade above 60 in each of his past 2 seasons. He played for Buffalo 2 years ago, and then last season he played for San Francisco. Now, when the move happened, I didn't even know Leonard Floyd was signed by the Atlanta Falcons. Free agency first couple of days are always pretty crazy. Like, I'm a Packers fan, so I guess I'm not really paying too much attention to Leonard Floyd moves unless he's signing with Green Bay. But my point is, I really like this move because first off, he's younger than Matthew Judon from last season, and he's not like prime athleticism Leonard Floyd, but he's still good at getting to the quarterback. He's still giving you almost 10 sacks per season, including 59 sacks over his last 5 years. He's very good at getting to the quarterback as well. So his sack number could be like 12, 13, 14. That's how good he is at getting to the quarterback, even as he gets into the wrong side of his 30s. And then we move to Divine Diablo real quick. And I wanted to talk about Double D. That's what I call Double D because I've covered the Raiders for a couple of seasons now, and I didn't really think the Raiders were going to bring him back. Linebackers are interesting. A lot of linebackers you kind of see is kind of almost the result of defensive coaching. And I really like the defensive coaching over in Atlanta. So I think a guy like Divine Diablo is going to fully break out this upcoming season. And I think he fits this defense perfectly because one of the things with Atlanta the last few seasons, and now you kind of see more name brand guys like Leonard Floyd. Last year you saw Simmons, you saw Judon. The thing with the Falcons defense is it's always littered with guys like Divine Diablo. It's always these guys that Falcons fans know, NFL fans know, but maybe outsiders don't. And I just kind of want to say, like, usually Atlanta's on the wrong side of that, right? Usually they're losing players like Divine Diablo. And I think a good example would be a guy like Foye Oluokun, where, in Atlanta, the dude's giving you like 150 plus tackles for a couple of seasons in a row, but nobody knows who he is except for Falcons fans or division fans or just hardcore good NFL fans. But my point is Divine Diablo just never really found consistency in Las Vegas, and I think he's, going to get that in Atlanta. And he's one of those players, you see these guys at like 25, 26 coming off their first contracts in the league as breakout players, and I think Double D fits that bill, and I just love calling him by that nickname, which, by the way, never stuck. Nobody else calls him that, so maybe we can turn that into a thing. But regardless, you got to focus on the edge, because the Falcons finished 31st in sacks last year with only 31 sacks. In fact, Falcons fans are well aware of this fact. It's the only franchise in the league with fewer than 300 sacks in the last 10 years combined. They've had fewer than 640 sacks in the last 20 years combined. I mean, the wrong side of history. These are just absolutely insane numbers, like just truly jaw-dropping numbers. Now, the Falcons, unfortunately, only have 5 total draft picks, but they have the 15th pick. And the 15th pick, super interesting, because there's probably going to be some stud edge rusher available like James Pierce or Shamar Stewart. But it is also important to keep in mind the Falcons have used 4 first-round picks on offensive players. All right. The last defensive guy in the first round Atlanta took was back in 2020 with AJ Terrell at pick number 16 overall. And I do think this is the year they use a first round draft pick on a defensive guy, because they got their quarterback, right? Pick number 8 last season, kind of thought they were going to go for an edge. They end up going with Michael Penix. Now it all makes sense. They used a second round pick, a third round pick, and a fourth round pick on defensive players last season. But even just getting a little bit worse, like Braylon Trice was injured for the season in preseason, so they barely even got to see any snaps from those guys. So the 15th pick's interesting. James Pierce or Shamar Stewart. Me personally, if any of those 2 players are available, I think whether it's Atlanta fits the bill perfectly, because this team desperately needs edge rushing help, especially just long term. I would love to see some stud edge rusher over in Atlanta, because they just could really use one, first off. But Shamar Stewart's interesting. James Pierce is interesting. I think when you go SEC, especially on the defensive side of the football, but even offensively, SEC players always draft well in the National Football League. But Shamar has some concerns because he never had more than a sack and a half in his 3 years of college football, but he did generate 59 pressures last season, which was 6 more than his 53 he had in 2023. So the guy's a beast at getting to the quarterback. He's just not really taking him down. He's only had a sack and a half in each of his first and only 3 years of college football. And then James Pierce kind of had a down year, but I think that's just mainly exaggerated. So folks, that's it for today. I haven't talked Falcons all off season, so I wanted to get this out to you. We'll talk draft stuff as the month progresses, but that's it from me. Hope you enjoyed it. Hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily NFL content. If you did, let me know if you want a part 2 Falcons video. We'll see you in a couple of days. Peace. That's it for me.